This is Andy again, and this is another tutorial. Today we're going to do the same tutorial I did with Windows for writing Octopi to an SD card for a Raspberry Pi setup. We're going to do this on Mac. There's a slight variation. You don't need to use PuTTY because you can just use Terminal for that, and you don't need to use Notepad++ because you can also use Terminal for that text editing features as well. Also, you can use Etcher IO, but since we're on a Mac, I actually recommend this Apple Pi Baker. It's has a little bit of extra features. First, it has this create a backup. So once you have everything all set up and ready to go with your Wi-Fi setup, your camera settings set up, some of the storage files, and your plugins all set up, I would come back, plug in your SD card back into the Mac, and then create a backup immediately, because this will be able to just be restored instead of using a blank Octopi image. Note to self is if you're going to use this feature, try to use the same SD card. You can use a larger SD card, but you're going to have to go back in SSH later, and I'll show you how to do that now. But you're going to want to then expand the file system again, or else only whatever the card you used, that size storage will be available to you. It's a common Raspberry Pi thing, but since you're using an image writing into an SD card and using that, it's going to use whatever the default size of whatever that image was. So typically like maybe a gig or two for whatever the images are. So you need to expand the file system afterwards to get the full use of whatever size SD card you use. I tried doing this tutorial with a 2 gig card. Everything worked all the way up until I expanded the file system. So I guess you can use a 2 gig, 4 gig SD card. I would not recommend it. Probably 8 or greater. I'm using a 32, again, the same SD card I used in the Windows tutorial. This card actually has everything already set up, so I'm going to start from scratch and wipe it. So Prep for Noobs creates a single FAT32 partition that'll be ready to go. So I am wiping everything, and we are starting from scratch. I have the image downloaded. We're going to try to do this in one take. Alright, so now to write the image to the SD card, we go to Restore Backup. This could be a backup of yours, or it can be a blank Raspberry Pi image. So you can use this for any distribution. I'm using it today for Octopi. So we're going to want to uncheck this auto eject because we're going to need to change some settings on the boot, on one of the files on the boot drive, so that we can get the Wi-Fi set up. Alright, so this is going to take 4 minutes. The USB card, or USB SD card reader that I have is really slow because this card is not a slow card. It should be writing a lot faster than 7 megabits per second. But as I stressed on the Prusa-forums, your bottleneck is not going to be with the SD card. I'm currently using a really old Class 4 card in my current setup attached to the Prusa Mark II. And it's fine. It's just an 8 gig card. You're going to want that at least or larger, especially if you're going to be using, if you're going to be doing time-lapse videos. So try to get, this one is cheap. This one is pretty fast read-write speed, and more than you'll ever need. 32 gigs was $12.99 on Amazon, and I'll post a link for that as well. I'll also post a link for Octopi, this image here, and I'll also post a link for Apple Pi Baker, which is a tweakingforall.com. So I'll post these links in the bottom of the video so you can grab this software too. And you might as well have the terminal window open because we're going to use that as soon as this finishes writing to the SD card. So the last 2 minutes we have for doing this, I'd like you to let me know what you think about my videos. If you think they're too long, or if you think you had a problem understanding a certain portion, please let me know. I do respond to all the comments I can get to. on all my videos, and you know, just be nice about it, and I'll probably respond back to you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Give a thumbs up if you like it, thumbs down if you hate this, and please subscribe. There's a, if you want to be notified of future videos, just hit the subscribe, and then there's a little bell icon next to the subscribe button, and you'll get notified every single time I upload a new tutorial video. Alright, thank you. So we have one more minute to go on writing our image to the SD card. So the Octopi image is actually a pretty small image. I believe it's less than a gig in size. So it's actually not that bad. You can really fit it on a lot of stuff. My 8 gig card has over 5 gigs available, I think, on a plain install. I think it's like 6 gigs. Then adding a few of the plugins and stuff like that, you're gonna want a little bit of extra space, especially if you're gonna use that camera, because the file size for a lot of your G codes are gonna be in the megabytes, but the time-lapse videos, depending on your settings, are gonna be in the hundreds of megabytes, or possibly even a gigabyte on a really long print with a lot of moves. I'll go over the Octopi OctoPrint settings in a different video, since that doesn't really apply to Windows or Mac. So I'll go through the features of OctoPrint later. Okay, so now our SD card is ready, and we can close Apple Pie Baker. We can close our browser for now. We need to now move on to Terminal, and we need to edit this file here called Octopi Network. So I like to use Pico, but there's other text editors. The one thing you do not want to use is you do not want to use the built-in text editor into Mac OSX, and it warns you afterwards, or once you open up this file, that not to use that to save it. It adds characters that are not compatible, and thus you won't be able to connect to your own network. So I like to just drag and drop. It makes it real easy. This password is going to be your Mac OSX password. We're not to the default Raspberry Pi passwords yet. And these hash tags over here on the left hand side, those are comments. So anytime the system is trying to read this file, it ignores everything on the line where there's a hashtag on it. So we want to not ignore this, we want to actually read this. So iFace WLAN 0 Octopi manual. So this is because we're manually setting in our Wi-Fi password, login and password. So some Wi-Fi network, and your password. Okay, so I'm not obviously gonna put in my Wi-Fi and password in here, but you're gonna put yours in there when you're doing this at home, and then you're gonna save the file. So to save it, you're gonna hit Control X, and that's what this right here, this section is. You're gonna hit Control X. We're gonna hit Y for save, and then hit Enter, and that now saves the file. So if we go back in and look at it, our text that we just put in there is now saved in there. So once you have that ready to go, we're going to load it into our Raspberry Pi, and then launch up, keep terminal open. I realize that I actually have to put in my login and password, so I cannot do this in one take. So sit right tight, I'll be right back. Okay, so once you've finished putting in your Wi-Fi login and password, you're going to want to eject your disk and put it into your Raspberry Pi and boot it up. So just install the power cable, automatically boots and connects to your Wi-Fi. So mine's actually been on for a little bit, so I know it's ready to go. You could also log into your router and check the devices on your router and see if you see a device named Octopi. that'll be your Raspberry Pi, and you can grab the IP address if you wanted to then. That's how I do it, because now I have two different Octopi devices with slightly different IP addresses, so I can't use the next trick for SSHing, but you probably can if you just have one device. So I want to go and use SSH, which is built into terminal. We're going to go sudo SSH. We're going to use our login for the Pi, which for just about everything Pi distribution, it's going to be Pi with a password of Raspberry. But here we can either type in octopi.local on our Mac, because we have Bonjour built in to the operating system, or like in my case, I'm going to actually put in the IP address. This is, since we're using super user do output, we need to use the password for our Mac. And this is just warning you what the actual SHA key is for it. If you reuse the SD card and you write a different image, you're going to have to wipe this key. Just Google how to do it. You'll get a specific warning on it. It just happened to me since I'm reusing this card. I have to reshoot this part because of it. So hit yes. Now we're going to need to know the password for our Pi, which by default is Raspberry, RASPBERRY, all lowercase. And here we go. Now we're in. Like I said before, you can use either one of these two to get here through SSH, but you have to already be logged in before you can actually use it. So I use the router to find out what the IP address is. So next, we're just going to log in and use our run a raspi config that allows us to enable the camera, expand our file system, and I forgot what the other thing is. There's three things we need to do if we're going to do that. So sudo raspi -config. Oh, change the password. Duh. Okay, so we need, this is optional, but it enhances the security. You're going to want to change the password from Raspberry to something else. And then we need to go into interface options if you're going to use the camera, and enable the camera. And then the last thing we're going to do is advanced options, expand the file system. Okay, so now we can reboot our Raspberry Pi, and then we can log into OctoPrint and use it for the first time, just like in the Windows tutorial. So we can close this out. Actually, I'll know it's rebooted when I see that this loses its signal. Alright. Now I'm going to type in that IP address again here. And here we go. Here's our first boot. Oh, it's actually, I guess, still rebooting, but we'll see it here in a second. Let's close out of this. This may take a little bit. I've noticed that the Raspberry Pi Zero does take a little bit longer to boot than a Raspberry Pi 3. It's not as fast. It's not as fancy. It is $10 versus $35 to $40. So you get what you get. Okay, so here's a setup wizard. That did take quite a while, so I'll probably edit that out of the video. So first thing we're going to need to do is set up access control. Alright, keep access control enabled. Next step is if you're going to import a Cura profile, I'm not, because I'm not going to be using this as a slicer. We'll do MK3, and I'll just put that in for both. Print bed and volume, rectangular, origin is in the lower left on the Prusa. I believe the size is the same or a little bit bigger on the Z. So I think this is 210 now. Next thing is we do want to enable this custom bounding box. And that's if you're going to use any of the slicers that Prusa has in their kit. Either the Slicer Prusa edition or the Prusa Control, or even Cura or KISS Slicer with the profiles enabled as well. You're going to want to put -3 here, I believe that's millimeters. And this is a little area for the priming. As putting in -3 millimeters stops the warning that you're printing outside of the range. You could probably put it like -5 if you want. -3, I believe, is what it needs. Okay, so now we're set up and ready to go. This is going to prompt me for an update immediately once it reloads. Now, I don't think it actually reboots the entire system, it just reboots OctoPrint. So that's a much quicker operation than rebooting the entire Pi. Yeah, this is a lot quicker. Alright, so want to log in. I'm going to get prompted for an update. We're going to update that now. And okay, and so now that that's finished installing the update, you're going to get one last little setting that you have to that you should probably enable. So we'll enable connectivity check and hit finish. Alright, so here's OctoPrint, which the Octopi image just runs this. That's pretty much its only real user interface. You're going to use this left side here to connect to your printer. I don't have one connected to my Raspberry Pi Zero yet, so this I'm not going to actually use. It is helpful to hit this auto connect. It'll connect to the printer automatically on reboots, so that'll be a little bit better. Down here is your file manager for all of your G codes that you're going to put in. You can also upload STLs and slice them through here as well. This is going to be the state. Once you've connected, this connection goes smaller like this, and then the state becomes kind of at the top. So it's offline because nothing's connected. It tells you the file that's printing, whether you have time-lapse settings enabled, which you edit through here, how much time is going to take total, how much time has gone so far, how much time is left, and much has been printed, I guess, in material. There's a few other plugins that you might want to enable. There's some that I personally like that add some features here and there. On the right here, you have a few tabs. The first one's your temperature. When you have your printer connected, you'll get two readings. One's for the bed temperature and one is for the hot end temperature. So you have these tools, and which is your hot end, bed, and you can set the temperature straight from here, and they'll adjust on your printer. You can also control the printer. We don't have a webcam attached right now, but if you did, this is where you would actually see it, and you can actually move the bed up, down, and you move the hot end up. There's a few other things you can adjust from here. G-code viewer, as you're printing, this shows you where the tool head or the hot end is going for each individual layer. So if you looked at this as the entire bed, you can see it tracing the actual line that it's doing. It's pretty cool. Terminal allows you to send commands, so printer codes, and then time-lapse settings. So you can do a timed one or on Z change. I do on Z change, but you can't use that if you're printing a vase or something in vase mode, because it would just be a continuous video, and your file size would probably get massively huge and then completely blow out your 32 gig storage in one print. So you can do time lapse. I keep the default settings, and you can actually hit this button to save it, and every single time you print something, it'll save a time lapse. All your finished time lapse come down here in the list, and you can download them and delete them from here. Okay, so I mentioned plugins a little bit ago. So here's where you would go for a plugin. Here you do a lot of different things here, but go to Plugin Manager, and we can add some plugins. Some of the ones I like are Cost Estimator and Themify, and you have to reboot for every single time you run these, so that stinks that it has to reboot, but it's because they're adding little features here and there. There's some other ones, like if you want to get notified when every single time something prints, and if you have a camera, it'll take a picture of the hotbed, of the heated bed, or bed doesn't have to be heated, which is with push bullet. So there's a push bullet plugin that you can get notified, and if you can visit the plugins homepage, you can get more information on how all of these works and how to set it up and everything. And that's pretty much OctoPrint. It's pretty convenient, especially if you're printing from home. It's not as convenient as, say, OctoPrint if you want to print from out of the house, since OctoPrint has like the cloud features built in, where you can just send something to the OctoPrint cloud and you can print it on your printer away from home. I do like a lot of stuff that OctoPrint gets right. It is a lot better in some aspects. So just the cloud part is not there, but the other part, what it does do, it does very, very well. Stupid little things like being able to actually see the bed when you're moving it. You can't do that on OctoPrint, which is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't have a layout like this where you're moving the bed, but then you can't see what you're moving. It makes no sense. Anyway, so I hope you liked this tutorial. Let me know what you think about it. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you hated it, and leave comments if you want to see some other tutorials, especially on stuff like this. I like doing it. Have a good night. Take care.